Hi there everyone, and welcome back to another episode of English Book on TV. We are your hosts. I'm Mr. Daryl.
I'm Miss Samantha, and today we will be discussing The Treasure of Monte Cristo by Alexandre Dumas, as retold by John Escott.
And this is for grades 7, 8, and 9.
Let's begin.
Here's the agenda for today. We will have a look at the vocabulary words we've chosen for you. We will have a look at the author, a bit of his history, and a look at the summary of the book.
After that, we'll get into the characters, the setting, and the main themes. Then we'll conclude by reviewing what we learned and giving you some homework.
I'm looking forward to the homework.
Me too. Now, our first vocabulary word comes from the title itself, and that word is treasure. And treasure is precious metals like gold and silver, gems, jewels, and other valuable objects.
Now, our next word is jealousy. Jealousy. This is the negative emotion of wanting what someone else has.
And maybe if someone is jealous of you, they will become your enemy, our next word. Now, an enemy is a person who is actively opposing, working against, or hostile to someone.
And if someone is your enemy, you might end up betraying them. And that's our next word, to betray. This is to be extremely disloyal to someone, to do something that puts someone else in danger.
And our next verb is to accuse. Now, to accuse means to say or claim that someone has done something wrong.
And you might accuse someone of our next word, treason. Treason, the crime of helping your country's enemies destroy your own country's government, betraying your government.
And if you commit treason, you'll probably end up in prison, our next word. And a prison is a building where people are legally held to punish them for a crime they are accused of having committed.
And our last word is revenge, something bad that you want to do to someone who has hurt you before.
Now keep all of these vocabulary words in mind throughout our lesson and as you read the book. Now, Daryl, I think we should talk about the author, of course, to understand the book a little better.
Yes, indeed. And today it is Alexandre Dumas, a French writer who lived basically within the 19th century. Right at the beginning, he was born in 1802 and he died in 1870. He's definitely one of the most popular and famous of French writers. He wrote books, plays, stories for children, magazine articles. His other famous book is The Three Musketeers, although today we are looking at this one. He comes from an aristocratic background and he had personal success in his life, but he had to deal with discrimination related to mixed race ancestry in his background.
Now, Dumas lived an extravagant life and he spent more money than he earned, so he wrote to pay off his debts. He was a romantic man who fell in love many times with many women, and he also loved traveling. Daryl, Dumas actually visited Georgia, and he is on an old Georgian postage stamp.
Amazing.
It is. So let's bring Dumas back to Georgia now with a look at the summary of The Treasure of Monte Cristo, which is an adaptation of his full-length book, The Count of Monte Cristo.
Now, our story begins with Edmond Dantes, a successful 19-year-old sailor who becomes the captain of a ship the same week that he's going to marry his beautiful fiancée.
But Dantes's professional and personal success makes others jealous of him. 3 men in particular, named Danglars, Caderousse, and Fernand, are so jealous of Dantes that they want to see his life ruined. So they decide to betray him by falsely accusing him of a crime.
They write a letter to their town's prosecutor, named Villefort, accusing Dantes of treason, even though Dantes has no political opinions of his own.
Dantes is arrested just before getting married, and though Villefort knows that Dantes is innocent, Villefort throws Dantes in prison just because Dantes knows some information that could hurt Villefort's career. Villefort becomes the fourth man to betray Dantes.
Dantes is taken to a huge, terrible prison called Chateau d'If that is on an island. He is moved to the dungeon, the worst part of the prison, and suffers greatly there. He tries to tell the guards of his innocence, but they won't listen.
After 17 months there, all alone in his prison cell, he hears a knocking and realizes that another prisoner is digging a tunnel. Dantes starts digging too, until finally the two men meet. This other prisoner is a small, old priest named Faria.
Over time, Faria and Dantes become very close, and Faria thinks of Dantes as the son he never had. So he gives Dantes important information. Faria has directions that will lead Dantes to a hidden treasure on the island of Monte Cristo.
Exciting. Eventually, after 14 years in prison, Dantes escapes from Chateau d'If and he goes to the island of Monte Cristo, where he finds the treasure that Faria promised would be there.
And with that new treasure, Dantes finally returns to his old town with a new name. He takes on the name of the Count of Monte Cristo, and he decides to get revenge on the four men who betrayed him and became his enemies.
Ooh, what a cliffhanger that is.
Very exciting.
So now we know what happens in the story. Let's explore who is in the story more with our characters.
Oh yes, we've got several characters here. We have Edmond Dantes first. Now, he is the protagonist. He is the Count of Monte Cristo. He's a good leader. He's an excellent sailor and captain, very successful at a young age, loved by his crew because he is fair and kind, though he creates enemies due to his success and his seemingly perfect life. By the end, he becomes set on revenge after escaping from prison and becoming rich, which is explained more in the fuller version of the novel.
Next, we have Danglars. Danglars is the cargo master, or the man in charge of the goods on the ship. He's older than Dantes, so he's jealous of Dantes's professional success. Danglars is the main antagonist in our story, since it was his idea to accuse Dantes of treason, and he was the one who wrote the letter that got Dantes arrested.
Next, we have another antagonist, Caderousse, Dantes' neighbor, who's also jealous of Dantes' success and helps Danglars. But actually, he's a bit nicer in the sense that he regrets his involvement in this false accusation against Dantes, and he didn't realize that Danglars was being serious.
Now we have Fernand. He is, unfortunately, another antagonist. Poor Dantes. Now, Fernand is in love with Dantes's fiancée, so of course he's jealous of Dantes's personal life. He is the one who gives the letter that Danglars wrote to the police.
And we have a fourth antagonist, so it hasn't ended yet. This man is Villefort, and he's the man that throws Dantes into prison, even though he knows that Dantes is innocent.
Oh, these are some horrible men, but let's end on a good note with Priest Faria, who is the kind older priest that Dantes meets in the dungeon at Chateau d'If. Priest Faria teaches Dantes many things, like multiple languages, math, science, philosophy, poetry, and literature. He loves Dantes like a son and gives him instructions on how to find the treasure on Monte Cristo Island, which helps Dantes restart his life. So, very good character at the end here.
Yeah.
But now we should take a look, of course, at our setting, which is the time and place a story happens.
Let's look at the when first. Now, it does happen it's been written in the mid-19th century. And a look at the famous general emperor Napoleon Bonaparte would be useful here. This, obviously, if you know the history of Napoleon, he was a soldier in the French army, rose through the ranks and achieved a lot of success, eventually becoming the emperor of France in 1804. He had a lot of supporters and he had a lot of enemies, so Napoleon. And you were often judged by which side of the fence you were on, whether you were his supporter or whether you were against him. It was a chaotic time, chaotic political time. Now Dantes is accused of helping Napoleon during the rule of the king, which would have been an act of treason, of course, though that's very unfair because Dantes himself had no strong political views of his own.
Poor Dantes. But that brings us now to the where. Many of our places happen in France. Now we have some ships that the story takes place on, and this really shows Dantes's excellent leadership and sailing skills. We also have Marseille, which is the town the characters live in, and most importantly, we have Château d'If, which is the horrible prison where many prisoners are treated unfairly and cruelly. But it's actually clear that a lot of the prisoners in Château d'If are there for disagreeing with political issues and not because they committed violent crimes. Of course, how can we discuss the setting without talking about the island of Monte Cristo, which is off the coast of what is now Italy, and it's where Dantes finds hidden treasure. He uses this island as inspiration for his new name and identity. Which brings us now to our main themes, and those, of course, are the main ideas of our story.
We have three themes that we want to bring up, and they are presented as lessons that you can learn from the book. Now, the first one is jealousy. It's jealousy. The three men, the three antagonists, Danglars, Caderousse, and Fernand, they were not being harmed by Dantes directly. They just acted cruelly and ruined his life simply because they were unhappy with their own lives and wanted what Dantes had. The lesson to be taken from this is you should try to better yourself and your own situation rather than comparing yourself to others and trying to ruin them.
That's a good lesson. Now next we have betrayal. In the full text of the Count of Monte Cristo, the four men who betrayed Dantes get the endings that they deserve. The lesson here is that harming those who trust you will only cause further harm for yourself.
And we have a final lesson as well, and it's about revenge. In the full text, Dantes' new life is consumed by revenge. It's the only thing he can focus on. And the lesson to be learned from here is that revenge alone doesn't bring him happiness in the end. It turns out that having love and caring about others is the thing that really fulfills him.
These are fantastic lessons. And of course, there are so many more themes and so many more lessons to discover in this text. But unfortunately, we won't have time for those today. You'll just have to explore them on your own. Now, let's review what we talked about today. First, we looked at the author, Alexandre Dumas. We went over the summary of the story of the imprisonment and escape of Edmond Dantes. We looked at the characters, some good, but many bad. Then the setting of 19th century France and Monte Cristo. And finally, we looked at the three themes of jealousy, betrayal, and revenge.
I think this would be a good time to look over the words, the vocabulary that we chose for you at the beginning of the lesson, and I'll go through them one by one now. So we had treasure, we have jealousy, enemy, to betray, to accuse, treason, prison, and revenge.
That brings us to our homework.
I've enjoyed a lot of the answers that have been coming in. Actually, we were just discussing this yesterday. In fact, one of the answers was quite surprising. Now, what do you think about that?
I completely agree, Daryl. This is a great way for you to participate in our lesson and for us to have that back and forth. So keep them coming.
Totally agree. Our question today is, if you are in Dante's situation, now, would you want to get revenge, or would you be able to forgive the men who betrayed you? And explain your answer.
Ooh, this one is going to be really good. I'm excited. Be sure to submit your answers to englishbookeducation.co.uk/homework. Thank you all so much for joining us today on our talk of the treasure of Monte Cristo, and we'll see you all next week. Bye, everyone.
Take it easy.